Welcome to Simply Caroline, a podcast dedicated to women empowerment where we will discuss a bunch of different subjects such as life, parenting, love, business, money, relationships, healing, recovery, addiction, entrepreneurship, and so much more. A podcast I'll do my best to keep simple, fun, and relatable and bring you tools to help you better your life. So thank you for being here. And here's your host, myself, Caroline Blanchard. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for being with us again this week. This week, I have an amazing, gorgeous guest, Christine Handy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
So I could go and take my full page and read the biography of Christine and tell you all about who she is. But there's so much to say that I think it's better that you just discover her as we go. But basically, Christine is someone I met online. Thank God for online and Zooms and all of this amazing technology. And I was so impressed by the person she is, but also by all that she has accomplished. And you will agree with me by the end of the podcast. Also, as how humble she is with all of that she has accomplished and done and everything. So, Christine, let's start by, where did you start your career? What were you doing before?
Thank you. I have a long bio, which is why most people have me do it.
There you go.
And we'll talk about that later, because I do want to touch on why the world wants to put us into a box of what we should be doing when we want to do all these things. And I'm absolutely one of those people that wants to do all these things. So I'll start with my modeling career. I started modeling at the age of 11. And it wasn't not the easiest industry for me to get into, not because they didn't want me, but because my parents had other children and they were busy. But I was very persistent with my family. And I said, no, it's something I really want to do for the long term. It's something that I don't want to just go in and out of. It's going to be a career for me. Well, it certainly did turn out to be a career. I am now 51 years old and still modeling, but from a different perspective.
You are what?
So I'm still modeling.
No, did you say you're 51?
Yes.
Holy. Okay, so for everyone who's not watching, go on YouTube and watch the interview, because she looks like, what, 30-ish? No, I didn't know how old you were, honestly. Keep on going. Sorry.
To be fair, I've never had any plastic surgery. The only surgeries I've had, which we will talk about, have taken away from my natural beauty, not enhanced it. So this is just God's grace, right? Just very lucky. Anyway, so I did continue my modeling career through college and high school, and ultimately moved to Barcelona to work for Elite Worldwide. And I ended up living in the Elite modeling agency in Barcelona. And then I went back home, which is Dallas at the time, and I modeled there, but I also got married and had 2 children. And so although I was still modeling, I was a mother, and that was my full-time job. So at that time, 35-ish, I was living what society would define as the perfect life. Mm-hmm. I had a very handsome husband. I had a very successful career that I could kind of go in and out of. I wasn't dependent on my modeling career for finances, but I would tiptoe in and out of it when I wanted to take a nice job. I had these beautiful children. We lived on the nice street, right. I had the right bags. I had the right clothes. I had the right earrings. And so from a society's perspective, I was on par, right? Living the life. And I would look at TV and I would look at social media and I would look at e-news and I would think, wow, I should be happy. I should be really happy. And for some reason, I felt kind of empty. And so when I was 35, I had a colon issue, and I ultimately had an emergency surgery on my colon. And when I was in surgery, unbeknownst to me, of course, I was asleep. The doctor nicked a vein in one of my pelvis bones, and the blood started pooling. But this doctor knew that I was a model, knew that I did lingerie modeling for Dillard's and JCPenney, and I was in the newspaper, and I was in on billboards, in a bathing suit or in lingerie. And so he didn't want to cut me wide open, which if he could have fixed it another way, it would have been great. Ultimately, the bleeding didn't stop, and he couldn't stop it. And so he had to cut me wide open. So from hip to hip, and it was an emergency. He had to open me up, cut through the muscles, cut through everything that they normally would have pushed aside. And so I wake up with staples, stitches, and a port in my neck with blood bag above my head. I had no idea what had happened. I had no idea. I didn't even know what a port was until I had one in my neck. And so suddenly this perfect life seemed a little bit different. And I started to have lots of time, months actually, trying to recover from the surgery, going, I'm not on my yoga mat. I'm not running around with my girlfriends. I'm not able to run around and shop. I'm stuck at home trying to heal, but I don't have this bubbly space fill me up anymore, right? I can't go use money to fill me up. I can't use materialism to fill me up. And I started to get really uncomfortable, because those are the things that I went to when I was uncomfortable. I was like, okay, call my modeling agency and get another job. That'll make me feel better. Well, I'm going to go to Neiman Marcus and buy a bag. That'll make me feel better. I'm going to go run around with my friends and they can tell me how cute I am in my cute little yoga outfit. That'll make me feel better. So I didn't have that anymore. And so that would have been a good time to do some introspective work, but I didn't. All the little things that I could have done to rebuild my self-esteem, I wasn't doing that. So fast forward a couple years, I'm back in shape. I'm back in my yoga clothes. I'm back running around town with my friends, and I tear a ligament in my right wrist. Just no big deal. I go find a doctor. I interview 3. I picked the Stanford grad. I picked the guy who was the Dallas Mavericks surgeon, right? He had the pedigree. And so I think he's going to be the right doctor. So we have the surgery. And 6 weeks, and I have the cutest cast. I have a red one for 2 weeks, and I have a green one for 2 weeks because it's near Christmas time. I have a pink one for 2 weeks, and I am so cute in my cute little cast that goes below my elbow, right? And so they take off the cast December 3rd, and 2 days later, I'm doing my little exercises they have me do, and my arm literally balloons, my right arm. I wake up on a Sunday morning and the pain in my arm was grotesque. I could not get out of bed. I put my arm on my chest like a baby and was shaking. I was just shaking in my bed, like not unable to move. So against what I was taught, which was don't challenge the medical field, don't call the doctors on Sundays. You can wait till Monday. I couldn't wait. So I disturbed, that's in air quotes if you're just listening. I disturbed my doctor on a Sunday, and he basically told me that he would see me that week, but that I over-iced my arm. He said to me, how long have you iced your arm? And I said, at least a couple hours, because all I could do was put ice on my arm and try to numb the pain. And he said, well, you iced it for too long. And I thought, gosh, I can't believe it. Here I am trying to help myself, and I am the one that's hurting myself. Right? So that's what I start to tell myself. You're injuring yourself. You did too many physical exercises. You over-iced it. So then I stay in bed because I can't get out of bed. The pain is grotesque. And I finally get into his office a couple days later, and he doesn't see me, but his physical therapist sees me. And she looks at my arm, and she's kind of a little bitchy and kind of has a little attitude. And I think to myself, gosh, I'm really putting these people out. It must be me. I'm like wasting their time. So she says to me, I'm going to splint it. Just go home. Don't move it for a week. And I'm like, okay, I'm good with that. I go back home. Now, bear in mind, I have small children. And I go back home and I'm thinking to myself, gosh, I really screwed this up. How could I have screwed this up so badly? About a week later, the pain is still grotesque. The little dinky, stupid thing she put on did not make any difference. The swelling got more grotesque. So I go back to the doctor, and literally he says to me, gosh, I don't see very many of these cases, and I am so sorry to tell you this, but you have this thing called RSD. And what it is your brain is telling your limb, which in this case is your right arm, that there's pain and swelling, but it's a misfire. You really don't have anything wrong. And I look at him and I was like, wow, now my body is failing me. Now my brain is failing me. Goodness, like all this is my fault. So he sends me to a pain management doctor, which was in his office. And this beautiful pain management doctor, was like, he's right. She concurred with his diagnosis. So now I have 2 medical degrees doctors tell me the pain and the swelling in my arm is a misfire from my brain to my arm. And I'm just like, wow. So he puts on a cute little cast, but at this point, the cast is like smothering the swelling. And so it's masking the symptoms, right? And so he puts the cast on for like 2 more weeks. The pain is getting worse. My hair is starting to thin, which, by the way, at the time, I look back and it's so obvious to recognize I'm pale. And, we're all taking like selfies, even at that point. And I'm looking at these pictures like back in the day and going, gosh, I'm so pale and my hair was thinning and I couldn't figure it out.
No, I guess that for us listening to this right now, it's really easy to judge or say, well, didn't you think about going somewhere else? Or, didn't you see? But when you're in the situation, you don't see. And when you're talking with a doctor, you assume they know what they're telling you. Yeah, sorry, continue.
Okay, no, this is so important. I am so glad you interrupted me. 2 things. 1, when you're in really intense pain, you see nothing other than how do I get myself out of pain? And that's not my opinion. That's a psychological reaction to pain. So you dismiss all the other obvious things that you could be doing because you're not in your right state of mind. That's 1. The second thing that happened was my self-esteem was so low that I wasn't cheering for myself. I wasn't my champion, right? Most people who have a very high self-esteem would go, I need another opinion. But I wasn't in that mental state. I had been modeling for 30 years at that point. And this is interesting about the modeling career, my career. And this has nothing to do about the modeling industry. This was on me. But I put myself in a position where 9 out of 10 times that you go for a casting call to get a modeling job, they say no. Not because of me. It's not personal. It's just that you go on 50 calls, you get 40 of them. That's just on average. And so you're constantly being rejected. Some people can handle that. Other people cannot. My self-esteem, unbeknownst to me, could not handle that. I didn't think I had a terrible self-esteem. I didn't see that I was trying to pour my love into things that could be taken away, right? I didn't notice that until they were taken away. So going back to the arm, and I'll make it a shorter story. After months of physical therapy and months of this doctor bullying me and doing 2 ridiculous nerve blocks in my neck to try to block the pain and the swelling, I was diagnosed with an infection in my arm that was dated back to the surgery. So for 7 months that I was going to physical therapy, my bones in my arm were breaking. Every bone in my wrist was broken by the time I'd seen the second opinion. I had no cartilage left and my arm was literally destroyed.
Oh my
I have no wrist in my right arm. I'm chronically in pain and I have no wrist. So I'm disabled in my right arm because of that. Now, and this is getting to kind of the main event. 6 weeks after my arm was fused, I was up in New York City where I found a really kind doctor at HSS, which is the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York, who would take my case. Here's one of the other problems with having a bad doctor. A lot of times other doctors won't take on botched cases. That's why they have that movie or that show on E! Entertainment called Botched. There's a lot of doctors that won't take your case when a doctor screws something up. So this doctor took my case. I flew up to New York City. He cleared his schedule. He fused my arm with cadaver bones and cadaver Achilles tendon. And I was flying back to New York City, and I was in the shower in a hotel. And for months and months and months, I was pouring liquid soap over my shoulder to wash my body because I had these crazy huge casts on my arm for 7 months. I didn't have, my right arm was not free from a cast for 7 months. So here's my arm outside of the shower for all this time. I'm not doing self-exams. I'm not going to get a mammogram. And so I'm pouring liquid soap over my shoulder and it's dripping down my body and washing it. That's how I washed my body for months. And so when I was in the shower in New York City, they didn't have liquid soap. I literally called the front desk. I said, could you send up some liquid soap? And she laughed at me. So I grabbed the bar of soap. My husband's in bed watching a movie. I have my massive cast outside of the shower and I take this bar of soap just to wash my pits really quickly. And I wash my breast and I find a lump in my breast. Immediately. 5 days later, I was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. And by that point in my life, I was like, I'm done. I've used up all the favors for my family and friends to help me for this entire year of an arm debacle. Now I am a handicapped woman with a fused arm, and I had no idea how I got here. I had gone from being this thriving mother, model, wife, living on this perfect street to being in constant pain, handicapped, scarred up, and now with breast cancer. And I did not know what was up or down. And by the way, I was about to lose my only thing that I thought mattered to other people, which was my looks. Right? I mean, you can't be a model for 30 years and think that your value is inside. My value, I believed, was outside.
I totally get that. And, you know, when you say you spiral down, it's hard. I know that when I have a toothache or something like that, I can't think. Like, I'll clear my schedule. I'm like,
yes,
don't think, don't talk to me. So I can't imagine being in pain for months because literally, you know, I was sick not too long ago and not sick at all, like just a cold, just a bad cold that I hadn't had for years. But I literally cleared my schedule. And I felt like in that time, I was in a fourth dimension. Like life was not, you know, time is not the same. Things are not the same. Everything is out of place. So I can't imagine like living that for 7-8 months. And the thing is, like, I'm sure people were still thinking and loving the same of you as they did before, but you are going spiraling down, not being in the reality anymore, really. So you're in your own world, and now they're telling you, well, basically you have a fatal cancer.
Yes, yes. And here's the other part of that. I wasn't sharing with other people that my self-esteem was destroyed because I didn't recognize it at the time. I wasn't sharing with other people what I was calling myself in my own head. Like that would be shameful. What I was sharing with other people was, I'm worth nothing anymore because I have no transaction. I can't give you anything anymore. And I'm not able to use my beauty, which is my only asset in this world anymore. It's going to be completely gone. And now I'm going to be scarred up and I have no idea what's going to happen to my chest. And I really believed that because I had no idea who I was inside. I'd never done the work. I was so dependent on the modeling industry and what I had, physically had, that I didn't realize what was inside my soul.
But I want to make a little, you know, little side note here is that I think that one of the big part is that you were aware that your value was on your beauty because it was bringing you a paycheck.
Of course.
But I really feel like the majority of women, we still think it's our value. You know, even if we're a lawyer, daycare worker, anything, we still think that the appearance is so much more than it actually is, you know? So it's just because you were really conscious of it because it did bring you your paycheck. But I feel it's something that is widespread.
Oh, yeah. And I do think that beauty in general in our culture is transactional. And it shouldn't be. Right? And so when I was diagnosed with cancer and felt all that despair and the knowing of the continued pain, physical pain, right? The emotional pain at the time, I was trying to drown out and not with stuff. I mean, I wasn't shopping anymore. There was no drowning it out with alcohol, drugs. I didn't do those things. But man, I can see why, I could see why somebody might turn to that because that kind of despair is smothering. So what happened was my friends started to show up every single day. They literally babysat me. one of my best friends had a list of people who said, I'm going to be there every Monday. I'm going to be there every Tuesday. I'm going to be there every Wednesday. And she had floaters. So like if somebody couldn't come, then they went to another list and there were floaters.
Oh my gosh.
And so I had this massive community of people who said, you're worth more than what you think. And we're going to prove it because we're never going to leave your side. And they didn't. And so when they started to show up for me, I was like, well, if they can show up for me and they don't want any transaction from this, they're not doing this as a popularity contest. They're not doing to get something from me. They must see something inside that I don't. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started to look inside and go, who are you? And then I had 15 months of chemotherapy, but I did choose, and this is where it gets kind of interesting for all the listeners. We do have moments or seasons in our life where we can choose to work on our self-esteem. Like during COVID, I know a lot of people who I mentor who I said, okay, take this time. You're going to have more self-inflection time. Take this time to work on your self-esteem, and here's some tools. So that 15 months I spent, even if I was throwing up in the bathroom, I'd lay my head on the floor, the cold floor, and just sit there and meditate on not the terribleness of it. I started to meditate on who I was and what I wanted to be if I survived the cancer. And so I took the focus away from the outcome. I was tired of feeling bad. I was tired of feeling bad about myself. I was tired of blaming myself for all these physical ailments that I had nothing to do with. But it's that voice inside my head that was saying, you're not worthy of the attention. You are the one that caused this to your arm. You're the one that should have seen another doctor. You're this, blah, blah, blah. And I was just labeling left and right and comparing and judging my own self. And the truth is, we didn't get a medical degree. That guy did. And the first oath that people take in medical school is do no harm. And he crossed that. And so when I started to talk kindly to myself, I started to figure these things out, and I started to change the tapes in my head. And when I started to change the tapes in my head, I started to be kinder to myself. I started to give myself more grace. I started to change my focus, which was, well, this doctor told me I had 20x% chance of survival. I'm not going to meditate on that number. I'm going to meditate on the fact that I have people showing up for me. I'm going to show up for me. I have faith in God. I have faith in myself. I have this faith in this team of doctors that I've compiled who I trust now. And when I meditated on that, I wasn't so concerned about the outcome because I had no idea whether I was going to live or die. But it didn't matter. Every single day, I had to show up for myself. And by showing up for myself, I showed courage. And by showing courage, that led other people to see courage, my own children, my friends, my community. If I had been meditating on, well, I just don't know if I'm going to make it. And I just don't know if I'm going to make it. And I just don't know if I'm going to make it. There's no value in that. It wouldn't have helped me, for one. First of all, I would have had less chance of making it if I kept saying that. And because I didn't meditate on that, I was able to focus on the more positive things that could come out of it. And I was basically planning my life on, well, if I do make it, this is how I'm going to live it. And so that season of my life, although filled with despair and difficulty and trauma, was also filled with an enormous amount of self-love and self-care. And I basically retrained myself to love myself for whatever it was that I was going through.
And I think that what you just said there is super important. You know what? Sorry, let me backtrack that. I know some people that will be like, oh yes, you're all into self-love and self-development and working on yourself. So your life is better this way and you don't feel the other things. And that's true. You still felt all the other things. It's just that when you put the work in, the outcome is different and you get through it differently, and you actually have tools to help you feel better while you're going through it and afterwards. But there's just one thing that is so true: what you focus on grows. And you chose not to focus on the fact that you were leaving. You focus on the fact that, you had a future to plan. And I believe so strongly that this is, it's a huge part in getting better as well. It's not only, the medicine and everything. A big part is also mindset. And, it has been shown over and over how much someone positive going through an illness versus someone negative going through the same illness has a different result. And so this is, it's
Right.
key.
Well, and I also think that you can have a great attitude and still have a different outcome. And that's not my opinion, that's proven. But if you have a good attitude and you have faith in God or faith in humanity or faith in the universe, whatever it is, and you're building life on solid ground, right? If you have faith in e-news and you have faith in society, those things that's like quicksand. I'm not saying that people shouldn't watch those shows or shouldn't, I don't know, like them. But if you value that more than faith or faith in, humanity or something that is bigger than the outcome, then I don't know how you get through it. Because the things that were taken away from me were the things that I meditated on for 40 years, right? My external value, materialism, all of those things can be taken from you. They were taken from me. I still have my bags in my closet, but I can hardly use them because I have a fused arm. And so all those things that I thought were my value were taken from me. And so the outcome could be the same, but how you get through it can change your life and other people's lives, right?
So you went through your chemotherapy. Did you go through losing your hair?
Yes. Every bit of hair on my entire body was gone. I looked like a little old woman. If you Google me, there's a couple pictures online of me as a chemo patient. It's quite startling, the difference.
See, for me, it's like I may be a bit shallow, but I can't imagine losing my hair. This is such and I'm just being super honest here. It's
tough.
My femininity,
Sure.
that, and my breast, honestly, is what makes me feel like a woman for me. So how do you get through that? Especially, and I also want to highlight the fact that you went from one extreme to the other. You went from being the image of beauty that, your beauty was your everything, to now losing it to the point of a point that no one can take basically.
For sure. 100%. Well, and I did. Okay. So losing your hair is one sort of hell. And then to lose your breast is a different sort of hell. Like we as women are defined by our breasts, right? And when I had mastectomies, I had implants put in right away. And so there wasn't a horrible sting like there was with my hair. Because when my hair was gone, I even wore wigs. And so that helped. That was kind of a cushion. But losing my breast tissue and putting in an implant, that helped me cushion the blow. So, but what happened with that was in 2020, it's a whole nother issue. My implants were recalled by the FDA because the implants that they had put in me were these rigid, very comfortable implants, but they were made from a mesh material that was getting into people's skin and could be causing breast cancer. I think that there's 530 cases or something. I don't know the exact number now, but enough. And so they recalled the implants. In 2019, I had them taken out. They put in the other implants that weren't causing cancer. But by March of 2020, when the whole world was locked down from COVID, I woke up one day, I had a really bright red breast, my left breast, and it was hot, swollen. And I sent pictures to my oncologist and to my breast surgeon. And I said, I think there's something wrong. And they said, get to the emergency room immediately. And I said, well, are people allowed to go to the emergency room? Mm-hmm. Because the hospitals are closed other than COVID patients, especially in Miami, big cities, right? And they said, no, go. We'll meet you there. So I get to the hospital and there was somebody at the door and wouldn't let me in. And my doctor's in the emergency room from behind the partition going, no, let her in. So I'm in the hospital and they keep me for 5 days on 7th floor. And there's only 3 patients on the 7th floor. If you were in the hospital of March of 2020, you were really sick. And they were saying to us, okay, we're keeping you far away from the COVID patients, but we didn't know. Nobody knew what was going on. And we had gloves on. Mm-hmm. That was before masks. They hadn't even done that yet. So they finally let me out of the hospital. They said, okay, the infection's gone, but we're going to put a PICC line in your arm, which is basically an IV they thread to your heart. And then there's an IV line outside, and we're going to send you home with a nurse. And I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? Like, I have not been through enough trauma. Now what? So the nurse is there for 2 weeks. And this is so interesting. I live in a building in Miami. I get home to my building, and the management office sends me an email and says, you can't come out of your unit. And I was like, what? And they said, well, you've been exposed to COVID. So you have to quarantine for 2 weeks. And I was like, over my dead body, are you going to tell me that I cannot come out of my home? I have a dog. I'm going to go down to the street and get some fresh air. And they said, no, I had to get my doctor. I had to get a letter from my doctor saying I was not in the hospital for COVID, because at that time people were like, they didn't want anybody to know they had COVID. So maybe they were in the hospital. And I was like, I had an infection. I was there for that. It was the weirdest time. And I'd been in the hospital a lot by that point, right? So I knew what it looked like to be in the hospital. It was so strange. So fast forward to April of 2020, the end of April, 30 days later, the same thing happens. Breast, red, send pictures, go to the emergency room. They check me into the emergency room. 5 days later, they send me home. My mom has to come pick me up. And now I'm like exhausted, like just emotionally and physically exhausted, going, this cannot be happening. A month later, because they said, I'm fine. You're fine. A month later, I travel to go see my son, because I hadn't seen him since the beginning of COVID. Now it's just June of 2020. People were allowed to fly at that point. So I go see my son. We have a nice few days visit. I fly back to Miami. I had to take 2 flights. So by the time I got to Miami, I was exhausted. I was sweating. I didn't feel good. I thought I might have a fever, but I wasn't sure. I was pretty sure I didn't have COVID, but we were all masked up by that point. And I get home and I'm trying to take off a button-down shirt, kind of like the one I have on. And I'm pulling the shirt on my left side and it's sticking to my body. And I finally pull it off and I look in the mirror and there's a hole in my left breast cavity, pushing out green pus, like oozing out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no. So I call my oncologist, I call my breast surgeon, and my oncologist FaceTimes me because she wants to see what I look like. Because she wants to see if I look like death. So she FaceTimes me from her living room. I'm in my living room. She's in her living room. And she's looking at me going, I'm going to send an ambulance. Because I don't even realize how sick I am at this point. But I had 104 fever. I was so sick that my oncologist said if I hadn't checked into the hospital that night, I would have been in critical condition by the next day. So by the time I checked into the hospital, they did an emergency surgery because I then had MRSA. I had a MRSA infection, which is a deadly infection, in my breast cavity. So they excavated my breast cavity, completely dug out the infection, which had gone into my skin, had gone into the cavity they had built after breast cancer. And so they excavated all of it, took it all out, cut out important skin. And so then there was no chance of ever getting implants again. So I went from having breast cancer with really pretty implants, which I loved, to taking the implants out, swapping them out because of the FDA recall, to losing them altogether, and then to become concave. Like I have a concave chest. So it was like 10 years of trauma. And then I was going through a divorce. I was like, this doesn't stop. So I woke up. I'll let you talk in a second. The story is so crazy. I woke up one day, months after the infection. I was still just trying to deal with the physical trauma of all the stitches and the staples and the emptiness, and then to deal with the emotional side. And I finally got up one day. I was so frustrated with all my self-pity. And I went into my medicine cabinet and I took out an ACE bandage. And I was like, I have to figure out a way to make like a bathing suit or a bandeau for women who have concave chests, because there's nothing in Miami that I could find that I could wear on the beach. And I didn't want to wear a prosthetic. I was like, okay, this is what I look like. This is the new normal for me. I got to get used to this. And I didn't want to go back on my self-esteem or my self-love or my self-care by trying to cover up anything. I was done with covering up. I was done with, adhering to a world that told me what I should look like. And so I took this ace bandage and I figured out a way to make a bathing suit. I called a bathing suit company in Miami and I said, would you take a meeting with me? And they said, definitely. And ever since then, I've started a bathing suit line for women with a concave chest. Here's the reason. If I felt this bad about what happened to me, other people were feeling that bad. And I had a responsibility to try to help them in their journeys. And that's what I've tried to do ever since my arm, the breast cancer, with my book. That's the reason I wrote my book, to show the world what it looks like to show up for people, to show the critical importance of self-esteem. Because if we don't have a critical self-esteem, a very high self-esteem, we're going to make decisions like I made with my arm doctor and allow people to bully us. We have to work on our self-esteem to make good decisions. It's that important. And so listening to your voice in your head, if you're calling yourself an asshole or names or not worthy or whatever you want to label it, stop that. You can't sustain a good life and make good decisions by calling yourself bad names. The world will call you plenty of stuff. It's their problem, not yours. Don't do that to yourself.
Yeah. Well, I'm I'm rarely like that, but I'm almost speechless. I just want to reach through the screen and give you a big hug and be like, oh my goodness, how did you survive all of this? Like, he gave me goosebumps, you gave me shivers. I held myself back not to cry. Like,
sometimes I cry about it. It's a lot of pain. It's a lot of trauma. And don't get me wrong. I look like I have pretty hair now and I get it colored and I put makeup on and all the stuff, but there's scars that are deep, right? And I remember when I didn't have hair. But the most important thing that I can teach people is that you have to have self-esteem. If you do not have self-esteem, you will not make good decisions. And we have a responsibility as women to teach each other that.
Yeah, and not just to teach each other that. I think that one big part that we need to do is cheer each other on, because,
it's so
since
easy.
I'm little, what I see between girls, it's competing and pushing each other down instead of like rising each other up and pushing each other and fixing someone's crown without having to tell the world, hey, see what I did? Just do it. Like, there's a few things that I want to say. First of all, I'm impressed with your friends. Well, not impressed. I'm glad that they did that. I would do the same thing for my friends. But, it's just to say how much we need people in our life. And when you don't know what to do to help someone going through something, sometimes just being there is showing them you are worth my time. You are worth enough. And I just love you. So sometimes just being there. And I think that was probably critical for you too, to not go through that period alone. The other thing is like, you talk about it very lightly about, okay, and then months went by and then I got sick of it. Well, those months probably felt like years, because I cannot imagine like losing my breast and going through all of this hell, basically.
Yeah.
And then having the one that you spent your life with telling you, I'm leaving.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a tough year for me.
Like, that's where I almost broke down and cried when you said that, because I think that this is like the cherry on the sundae. It's the top of the top. It's just like really, really, but I'm not judging anyone, but it must have been hell for you. And that we're not talking about 10 years ago. We're talking about a year and a half ago. And you're still here standing strong and being like, I want to help people get better. And I think that, that's probably one thing that is giving you such a feeling of power, because you have the answer to so many people. And for all listeners out there, it's not only for people who will go through breast cancer or cancer in general. It's not only for people who will go through, medical complications or whatever. I think that one of the biggest message that you're giving is working on your self-esteem.
Yes.
Because at the base, even when we have everything and even when we're healthy,
Yes.
quite often it's not even there. And, if I backtrack to the beginning of the interview, you said, I had the perfect life. I had it all. And still, there was this
And
emptiness. Do
yeah.
you think it was that self-esteem that wasn't there, even if you were a big model, super popular, rich, and
Yes.
had it all?
Yeah. I think that when you don't have a self-esteem, you're constantly looking outside of yourself to fill you up. Whether it's some people have alcohol, some people are addicted to money, materialism, showing society that they're good enough, even though they don't feel that way. Some people are addicted to exercise or whatever it is, or to other people's accolades, or to likes on social media, or to comments on social media, or to followers on social media. Those things can be taken away. And if that's what you have built your life on, that's quicksand. And I had built my life on not social media, because it wasn't really then at the time, but I built up my life on other people's opinions of me. And when I was pushed against the wall and had all of this trauma, quickly that went away. And my pride and my ego, which had fueled me, saying, oh, you're not good enough. You have to be out here on your own, strong. You have to be a tough woman. You can do all things. That was a lie that I told myself. That's lies that people tell women. That's not true. We shouldn't have to do all things. We should be able to ask for help without feeling guilty or shame about that. So when I let all of that go and I was able to be vulnerable and say, I need help, I'm doing this wrong, then I was able to help myself. And so when the pride and the ego goes, you no longer care what society thinks of you. You're like, man, I'm just trying to get till tomorrow. And at the end of the day, if I die on my deathbed, I'm not going to be worried about what society thought of me. I'm going to be worried about my kids. I'm going to be worried about the people that love me and the people that I love. That's it. There is no U-Haul behind the hearse. You cannot take that shit with you.
No.
So why do we covet it? Because we don't know how to fill ourselves up. We got to fill ourselves up with self-love, self-care. And that's it. That's the answer. But it's a practice and it takes time. And I'm not here to tell you that it's just one focus one day and you've shifted. It's not true. I work on my self-esteem like I go to the gym. I go to Harvard. I'm getting my master's degree right now because I'm working on my brain. But I also come home from class and I work on my self-esteem because it can be rocky. But even though I feel unstoppable because my faith is unshakable, I still work on it. And I still preach about it because I know how critical self-esteem is. These are not words that we just throw around. Self-esteem, self-love. They're not just little hashtags. They're critical to life's choices.
Yes. And, you were put on my road for a reason. The listeners have heard that in other podcasts, but yes, I have been, I've never had faith into too much else that was bigger than me. For me, it was always like, it's me against the world. And I've discovered recently that I needed to, it wasn't an option. I needed to have faith in something bigger than me, and whatever is that bigger thing, bigger than me, you need to. And every single person that I hear that went through, that can cure big events and all of these things, they did it with some kind of faith. I didn't hear one person who told me, I went through this all alone. They all had to believe that it would be better, hope that it would be better. And you can't have all of those feelings if there's not faith, because it's all things that you don't see. So you need to believe they will happen. So that's the pure definition of faith. But what I want to get to as well, Christine, because you also, the title of the podcast, Walk Beside Me, it's your book and it's basically your whole story. And now it's going into a movie. And, I was joking with you pre-interview, but who's playing you in that movie?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, they didn't give me the power to choose the person. And the movie was supposed to start filming in May of 2020. And so now it's being reinvented right now. So I'm not sure who they're choosing to be, but I do know it has to be somebody between the ages, an actress between 38 and 42. Because that's when kind of all.
I'm a little too old. So.
I am too. That's kind of the age when I was going through all of that trauma. Well, not the recent trauma, but yeah.
Who would you pick if you could?
I don't know. Obviously she has to have a certain body type, look similar to me, but I don't know. I don't know.
I pick Hudson for that. I don't know why, but
she would be good. And there's a couple other characters that would be beside, because the friends, like I think in the film there's 4 main characters. In my book there's like 28, because there's a lot of friends, right? There's a Monday girl, Tuesday girl, Wednesday girl, floaters, all this other things. But in the movie they had to narrow it down to 4. And so I kind of have this vision of kind of the group, like, and I don't know. I think it's whomever they pick, it's going to be a really interesting group of women. I bet they stay friends forever. I can't wait to be on set.
Well, if they need one of 47, I'm available. So I can give you my phone number. Just have them calling me. I'll clear my schedule. But I'm joking a little bit about that, the movie, but it's a huge thing, because for a book to become a movie, it has to be something that is very substantial, that is also being able to be shown in a picture versus just words. But it's also, and they just go with the exceptionally good ones. So congratulations for that, because that's not, a small achievement. And again, the word is impressed. What I'm so impressed by with you is that you went through all of this and you're standing strong right now, and you're able to tell your story. And you don't seem like you have any self-pity or whatever. It's just like, well, this happened. The consequences were these, and now I'm looking ahead and I'm continuing. And what I also like is that, when you said you had your chest concave and you wanted a bathing suit because you didn't want to wear a prosthetic, you chose to just finally embrace exactly who you were. And that was probably a first, right?
Yeah, I think that after cancer, I was who I was all day long. I was never somebody different. Like, I had been somebody different for the first 40 years of my life. I was my husband's wife and whatever he wanted me to be. I was my kid's mother and whatever they wanted me to be. Those are the roles I played. And after cancer, I was Christine Handy all the time. And that was very freeing, right? And so when the concave thing came in, I had already had a good foundation being who I was. If I had not had a foundation, I don't even know how much that would have unraveled me. I was pretty unstoppable in my self-esteem at that point, but that even raveled me. And so that's the other reason why we have to really work on our self-esteem, because things can still upset our apple cart, right? But another thing that I did after the concave thing, because I had not worked as a model for about 3 years. And I decided when I was concave and after the healing had taken place physically, not necessarily emotionally, because I still struggle with it, I called my modeling agency and I said to them, I would like to walk in New York Fashion Week. And they were like, you're kidding, right? And I said, no, I'm not kidding. And I said, oh, and by the way, I haven't seen you in a while, but I have a concave chest. And they were like, well, we need to see it. And why don't you come into the agency? And in all fairness to them, that's exactly what they should have said to me. So I go in the agency and I don't have a bra or a prosthetic on. And I'm like, this is what it is. Feel it. These are my ribs. Like, you can really feel it. And I said, we have a responsibility. I'm a lifer in the modeling industry. We collectively have a responsibility to show self-love and self-esteem in a woman who's scarred up and who doesn't look like necessarily a woman anymore because her breasts are gone. And how can we do that? We can use the platform that I've lived my life using, right, as a model. And they were like, let's think about it. So what I did was I decided to go to New York Fashion Week last fall in September. And I have lots of friends in New York. I do lots of work up in New York. And so I said to my New York friends, can you get me in some of these shows? And they said, sure. So all my friends would go in Ubers around town, have lunches, then they'd go to the shows. I was on the subway and I was going back and forth to any show that I could walk into, any show that I could bother people to get into, any show that I could push my way into. I got in. And I went right for the designers, or I went right for their PAs, or I went right for their PR teams. And I would say, this is who I am. This is my name. This is what I'm trying to do. And you know what? It worked. So in February, New York Fashion Week, which just happened 2 months ago, I walked in 4 brands. I walked in 4 shows on the red carpet.
Congratulations. Like, what an achievement. What an achievement.
Here's the thing. One, if people don't hear you, if they don't believe in you, do it yourself. That's one. 2, it took a lot of self-confidence for me to relearn how to walk on a runway. I haven't walked on a runway in 30 years. I was walking in heels. Nobody was walking in heels during COVID. I was walking in heels for 30 days before the fashion shows. I was walking in heels to the grocery store, these like stiletto red heels, because I didn't want to trip. I did not want to trip on the New York Fashion Week. So I go up to New York Fashion Week and I have been practicing for a month. Like, I'm going to work out in my heels, right, in Miami. I go up to New York Fashion Week and I show up at the first show, and the girl, one of the models who's like 18, looks at me and she goes, "Oh, are you here and one of the makeup artists?" I go, "No, I'm one of the models." And she was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Now, if my self-esteem was low, that would have shattered me.
You would have walked right back and be like, I'm out of here.
I'm out of here. But I was like, oh, that's cute. That's so sweet. No big deal. And so when all the models, like, we had to be there 7 hours before the show started. When all the models were there, were there out for lunch. We did a run through, and then they went out to lunch and got food. I was walking that runway. I never took a break because I was like, I'm not going to be the 51-year-old woman on the runway that falls. I got to represent the breast cancer community. It's my responsibility. And so, man, when I walked that runway, I was so confident because I was equipped. I was equipped emotionally and I was equipped physically because I'd walked around my house in Miami for a month with heels on. I equipped myself, right? That's what we have to do. It's our job.
That is, I decided just as we were talking that we're changing the title of the podcast. So now you know why the title is Unstoppable. It came to me, and that is Christine Handy. But you know what? I admire you for that because I did a bit of runway when I was way younger, like probably 18. And it is quite something to be out there knowing that everyone is analyzing every single thing. That's like, you will trip into anything, and I was clumsy. So anyway, I'm not going to go into my story, but just the fact of, even now, if you would tell me like walk the runway and I have nothing that I particularly have to fight with myself. Yeah. You're still very self-conscious being there and having everyone looking at you. And on top of that, people know your story. So clearly it's like, they're analyzing even more. So I find your self-confidence like a model to follow. And it's just like, we should all be like that. And there's one big thing that I want to say too is self-compassion. You use that a lot. Like, you realize at some point when you were talking to yourself. I just want to give a little trick to people that someone told me, and now I do this with myself. When you talk to yourself, imagine that you're talking to your 5-year-old daughter or son or whoever. So when you tell yourself like, oh my gosh, I'm so ugly this morning. Well, just picture looking at your daughter's eyes, like at 5, and telling her like, you're so ugly this morning. Like, why would you go out like dressed like that? We would never, ever say that to them, ever. So whatever you would not say to others, don't say to yourself. And that's like, it's a big part of building your self-esteem is stopping, hitting it downwards. So anyway, Christine, I feel like we could talk for hours, and I will have you back on the podcast because, I know that you're developing different projects that will
really
be into teaching self-esteem and teaching self-confidence because, you have people like me and a lot of others who told you have to do this.
I have to. No, I'm planning on it.
Yes, because it's you are radiating, and it's beautiful to see, and all of this after going through so many, hoops, I should say. Um, it's beautiful to see. I admire you. You're so impressive. So people Google her because you can actually watch her walk the runway. You can watch her in her modeling years before. You can watch her, doing all of the activism that she's doing now, specifically for, women and self-esteem, and being stronger and showing up for ourselves. It's so critical. And then soon in 2023, we will see the movie.
Oh,
But for
that's
now,
great.
you can get our book. Christine, what's your book?
My book is called Walk Beside Me by Christine Handy.
Awesome. And where can we find it?
Really everywhere. It's on Barnes and Noble, Target, Amazon, indie books. It's really on most book publishing platforms. Can I
Awesome.
say one more thing before
Of
we?
course. Absolutely.
So the young people, hopefully, that are listening to this who don't have children yet, my biggest tip is to take a picture of you as a child. I put one in my bathroom and I put one in my living room. And whenever I walk by that picture, I look at that girl and I say, I'm going to protect you.
Oh, yes.
That is a self-love exercise that I do every day, and it helps me so much.
Yes, you're so right on that. So, Christine, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for sharing with us. And thank you for doing all of the great work that you're doing, just for the good of it. Like, really, it's really helping. And we need so many more models like you. I'm sorry, my French doesn't want to leave me today. It's
I love
really
it.
like coming in front of my English, like you will not speak English, but we really need,
I love it. That's what makes you you.
yeah, we need more models like you, and not just for women of my age or of our age,
Every age.
especially for the new generation, because,
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
I see my daughters going through it now. We all need a self-esteem class, and we all need a self-esteem boost.
Yes.
I will put all of your information to reach Christine and to follow her, and to everyone who stayed with us today. Thank you so much. We will see you next week. And Christine, again, thank you.
Thank you.